Hi, my darlings. I'm Sophie Darling, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're reacting to episode 5 of series 2 of Vinland Saga. Last episode was a particularly emotional one in terms of we're seeing just how impacted Thorfinn is by his past, by the memories of all the blood that he shed and all the people that he's killed in order to get where he is today. And we're also seeing how Aina had to wrestle with that desire for revenge against someone who wasn't to blame for his family dying, but is still similar to those that invaded his village that caused him so much pain and suffering. So Thorfinn isn't the person to blame for his parents and his sister dying, but it is understandable why he was so angry and frustrated because he is a part of that system. He is someone that participated in raids and invasions. And even though it wasn't Ina's family that suffered at Thorfinn's hands, there are numerous families that have suffered because of Thorfinn. So I just want to clarify my position here because there was some very engaging conversation on my previous episode, and I feel like I might have been taken a little bit out of context. So that may have been my fault on not explaining my position clearly in my previous video. But what I have to say is that I'm much better writing than I am speaking. I find it really difficult to speak off the cuff, and that's why I kind of stumble over my words or I don't talk about everything that I want to talk about because I don't quite know how to say it. I need to take the time to sit down and write it out. I am a better writer than I am, what's the word? than a speaker. I don't know why I forgot that word, but writing allows me to kind of think about what I want to say, delve into it a bit deeper, and speaking off the cuff is hard because I'm trying to pull it from my memory, I'm trying to pull from what I've just watched, and I don't really have the time to kind of sit down and formulate my thoughts to the same extent. And I know some of you are going to be like, why don't you just like take time away, go back over the episode, and then write down what you want to say in your outro and then talk about it? I would, but it would take me so much longer to film, and I have so much to film that I have to be very conscious of time. And if I did that for everything I was filming, I would be here for hours. And unfortunately, I do have a full-time job. I have responsibilities outside of content creation and my job that I have to do. So I don't have the same time as a full-time content creator. So yes, I understand that it can be a bit frustrating because you want to see these deep dive analysis, and I would love to give it to you. I just don't have the time, and I have to be very conscious of that, especially because we are watching so much and we are filming so much. I also do my own editing, which kind of doesn't help things because it doesn't really give me the time to go back over and write things out and formulate because I also have to edit. And I edit like every single day of the week. So what I wanted to clarify is that when I was talking about Thorfinn not being to blame, I don't mean that he's not to blame for all the lives that he's taken. When I say he's not to blame, I'm talking in the specific instance of Ina's family dying. He isn't to blame for that because he didn't kill them. So he isn't to blame. Does that mean that he shouldn't be held accountable for the harm that he has caused in raiding, invading, killing numerous people? No, he should still be held accountable for that. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be. But what I am saying is that we need to be understanding and empathetic because he was a child. He was raised in that environment. He didn't know any better. And it was do or die. He either fought in order to live or he died. That was the only options that were presented to him. I think what we forget is that there isn't really an element of choice. I seen a few comments talking about how like Thorfinn has a choice, that Thorfinn could have just chosen to stay in that village and he could have learned the language and he could have been at peace. But for how long? Because these invasions were happening all over. So if it wasn't Askeladd that invaded the village, it would have been somebody else. This is the point. Thorfinn doesn't have much of a choice because the choices aren't really clear cut. We're also expecting a child to have the same rational, conscious thought as an adult. And we've seen how childish and irrational Thorfinn can be because he is a child. So we're expecting him to have the conscious ability of an adult to determine right or wrong. But what we also have to factor in is that in war, what's right, what's wrong, what's good or bad becomes blurred. And when you are a child, it becomes even more difficult to distinguish it. So for me, I've done a lot of research into the socialization of violence into children because of the environment that they grow up in, especially in relation to where I live, which is Northern Ireland, and our civil conflict. So my background is quite heavily involved in the socialization of children into violence and how that impacts them growing up, because violence becomes normalized and internalized as righteous and justified. And it becomes difficult to blame them for how they act. You can hold them accountable, but there is an element of empathy that needs to be given because socialization is so prevalent in us all. We are very much a product of our environment. You could argue nature versus nurture, but I will always argue nurture because I don't think anyone is born inherently evil. I don't think anyone is born inherently violent. I think we are products of our environment. Is that to say that everyone who grows up in a shit environment is going to be a shit person? Absolutely not. There are people that make an active, conscious effort as an adult to not replicate that cycle. But again, that's as an adult, not as a child, because as a child, it's hard not to replicate what you know, what you see, what has become normalized. So, what we have to factor in, I feel like I've said factor in a lot, so I do apologize. Take a shot every time I say factor in. You'd be absolutely wasted. But Thorfinn joined Asgard when he was 6. He saw his father die. He stayed with Asgard for 11 to 12 years. He was with Asgard longer than he was with his family. He was with Asgard longer than he was with his father. When his father's trying to teach him these fundamental life lessons, he's too young to fully understand the importance of them because he's a child. What his father's teaching him is philosophies that he has learned through his adult years, through his time in conflict and war. You can't expect a 6-year-old to fully internalize that, especially when that 6-year-old sees their father betrayed, killed in front of him brutally, and then grows up with Askeladd and Viking raiders and sees bloodshed, violence, conflict, and it's promoted as honorable and justified and necessary. And he also nearly died himself because he didn't know what to do when he was thrust into a battlefield, and he was around the same age, 6, when he took his first life. So he knew in that moment, at the age of 6, that if he didn't kill, he would be killed. All of that is going to impact his perception of the world, is going to impact his perception of himself. Again, the other thing that I want to address is this aspect of, well, he made a choice to stay. He could have run away, but he didn't, because Askeladd said that he would have just presumed that he went missing or whatever, and that Askeladd wouldn't have come across him or, yeah. And I understand that. It was a choice for him to stay. But again, we really have to ask ourselves the question of, is it really a choice when this environment is all that he's known? So why would he run away from the environment that he has grown up within and has accepted as part of his everyday life? He's not going to see it as something that he needs to run away from. Yes, he does make the conscious choice to leave Leif to go and get his revenge against Askeladd. That I will agree with, that was a choice. But that's to reiterate that he's trapped in this cycle of trauma, in that he's angry and he wants revenge, and it's a repetitive cycle. So the thought process is that because of what he's gone through, because of what he's experienced, he's reluctant to allow himself to be happy because he doesn't understand what happiness is. He's been away for so long that happiness eludes him, that he doesn't remember what it's like to have a family that cares about him, that doesn't involve bloodshed or violence. So I don't think that we should be really harsh on Thorfinn in terms of, oh, well, he made an active choice to involve himself in this. Again, I still think he's very much a product of his environment. That whilst he may question at times what this is all about, that is showcasing his journey to distancing himself from it. But I think initially the reason he stays is because he wants revenge. He is a victim to that. And we see this time and time again, that everyone's a victim to something, everyone's a slave to something, and Thorfinn's a slave to revenge. So if you are so locked and entrenched into that thought process, that you can't think rationally about the situation that you're in other than this one goal. Is it really a conscious choice? Or is it a product of your environment and a product of your socialization and a product of your emotional state? I don't think it's a choice or it's as easy as us saying it's a conscious choice, because I would say it's actually not really a conscious decision. It's more an irrational process. It's his immaturity showing, whereas series two is showing his shift, his ability to move forward and find a purpose. But at the same time, we're also seeing him haunted by what he's done, which is a recognition in itself that he accepts that what he did in the past is wrong and he feels guilt for it. Because if he didn't feel guilt, he wouldn't be haunted by it. He wouldn't care. But he is haunted, which shows guilt, which shows that he's coming to terms with his past, with what he had to do in order to survive, that he feels the pain and suffering of those lives that he's taken. I don't think we should chalk it up to not being able to feel empathy for him, because again, I'm not excusing him by any means. He needs to be held accountable for what he's done. But I don't think it's as easy as saying that it's a choice or that he's a hypocrite because he isn't emulating flaws. Because when we're saying that, we're expecting a child to behave the same way as an adult. And this isn't to say that children aren't intelligent, that children can't make choices for themselves. But we also have to remember that your frontal cortex isn't fully developed until you're 25. Again, you will make stupid, dumbass decisions throughout your life because you haven't fully developed your cognitive ability to think it through. And as children, that impulse drive is stronger in you than your ability to think out the long-term consequences. Children are sort of driven more by their emotions than they are by critical thinking. And again, this isn't me saying that children aren't intelligent, that they're not smart. It is just a fact. It has been widely researched that children are more irrational, more emotional, that they don't quite have the ability to think about the long-term consequences, which is why when Askeladd dies, he's almost saying to Thorfinn, have you thought about what you would do when you did kill me or when I did die? Because what do you do next? He hasn't thought about that because he's a kid. He's not going to. But that's sort of what's created this existential crisis in him, is that he has no sense of purpose or drive because his whole life has been fueled by this emotional state, by this need for revenge. Again, I'm not saying that he's exempt or excused from all the harm that he's caused. I'm just saying that we need to be more empathetic and understanding as to why he did what he did in series one, why he became the way that he was. I don't think he had much of a choice, and that is because of the way that he was raised. I think he is a product of his environment, and it is beautifully demonstrated in this writing. But I also think that we need to be understanding of his situation and understanding of why he is the way that he is because of everything that he's seen and done, that he doesn't know any better. Because if children are raised in a violent environment and violence is normalized, then they begin to accept that that's a normal way to behave and a normal way to react. So Thorfinn seeing this as the only way to exist in the world isn't unusual and it's not uncommon. It is documented worldwide in civil conflicts and conflicts in general, where children are forced into fighting as child soldiers, but also where children are raised in environments where there is heavy paramilitary activity or open conflict and rebellion. They grew up to emulate what they see, and that's very much what we see with Thorfinn. He can't emulate his father because he wasn't with his father for that long. He was with his father for 6 years. He was with Askeladd and his crew for 11 to 12 years. So I think we're being a little bit too harsh on Thorfinn. I am just going to say, again, not saying that he's not guilty or that he isn't to blame or be held accountable, but I do feel like we need to be empathetic and less critical and kind of understanding why Thorfinn does what he does without blaming him entirely by saying that he had a choice or by saying that he's hypocritical. I think we need to understand how his experiences shape him into being the person that he is. I just had to clarify that. It was a very interesting conversation. I really did enjoy hearing people's differing perspectives, but I just wanted to use this moment to try and clarify my thought process because, again, I think it was possibly my fault that people took me out of context because I maybe wasn't as clear in what I was trying to say. Hopefully I've cleared things up now. Fingers crossed. But I just wanted to use this space to talk about it further. But last episode as well, we also got a glimpse of Canute, which means I think this next episode is going to focus on Canute because we know that there was mentioned about Harold raising an army. So it could be that Canute now has a direct challenge from his brother. But without further ado, we're going to get into episode... I forgot what episode we're on. Yippee, episode 5. Oh, it's Canute. My boy. Are we going to see the aftermath of what happened with Thorfinn? I swear to God, if they show Askeladd dying again, I'm going to be a wreck. That was such a brutal episode as well. It broke my heart. I don't want to see him die again. Ooh. It was so brutal. I didn't know what to expect in that episode, but it was so emotional. I cried so hard. And I didn't think I would ever cry that hard over Askeladd, but oh my God, it destroyed me. I wonder if we're going to see the weight and the impact of being king on Canute, how he's had to wrestle with it. The war. And this isn't what Canute wanted. He was hoping in becoming king he could bring peace. This must be really hard for him. His dreams and hope for a better world hasn't really come to fruition. Oh, the dog. So much death and destruction. Not what Canute wanted at all. Look at his little goatee. Is it really a goatee? It's more like stubble. Why is he there? Wasn't he like feeding information to his father about his plans? Eh? That's not what Canute wants. Oh, he's laying down the law. But not Canute's custom. He's gonna make an example of them so nobody does the same thing. Gunnar, you're such a weakling. Like, he can't even be the one to do it, that he has to force it onto somebody else. Where's 4Kill? That's for him to decide, not for you. There's 4Kill! Oh, for fuck's sake. He turned against Canute now? Oh, I must appease that. Fuck's sake. Is he looking for a fight again? Let me hit him once. I was wondering where Forkill was. I love how many people it takes to hold him back. Oh, that's why he's pissed. He's not changed, which is great to see. He is pissed because Canute stopped his battle and he wants to continue fighting. But it's so good to see Forkill. I was wondering when he would show up again because obviously we saw Gunnar, we saw Floki. I was hoping we'd see Forkill. It's just so good to see that he hasn't changed at all, which is amazing. I also love that Canute is making an example. He's basically saying that this isn't tolerated behavior. That if these men aren't going to act with dignity, then they are not worthy to serve in my army. They need to be eradicated, and we need to ensure that this behavior isn't tolerated because I outlawed this, I banned this, and these people are blatantly disrespecting me and my law as king. So therefore, I'm going to make an example, and I think he's right to do so. Good on you, Canute. And he's not shying away from it either. He's not saying, oh, well, we shouldn't do anything. He's putting weight behind his words. He's showing that he's not just a man of pretty speeches. He is a man of action too, that he will not tolerate blatant disrespect. And I love that he still has these noble characteristics. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how the crown has impacted upon him because he's been at war since he inherited the throne, essentially. He was so young, and now obviously he's a lot older. I say a lot older, but he is significantly older than when he inherited. He hasn't been able to fulfill what he wanted. He hasn't been able to achieve his initial aim, and he likely feels a lot of frustration and perhaps resentment that this idealism that he had was maybe merely that he hasn't been able to create the peace and bountiful paradise that he wanted to in series 1. I guess in a way it's showing the contrast between idealism and reality, that this dream that he has, that he believes himself destined to fulfill, pales in comparison to the actual reality of being a king and the challenges that come with it that present themselves. Because obviously with his father's death, the king that was hiding in France decided to come back and is now trying to reclaim England. And he also has a brother that is raising an army, which is likely causing even more hassle too. So I think Canute, bless him, is realizing that when the world around you is inherently greedy and trying to grasp for power, you'll never truly be allowed to create this better society that you've been so determined to do. But he is still trying, as we can see through him making laws that outlaw reaping the spoils of war and also slavery and enslaving people. So we are seeing that he is attempting to create this better world. But when you're constantly at battle and you're constantly in war, you kind of never really have the opportunity to build, only destroy.
あとちょっとでエアドリクの首をぶった切れるとこだったのによ。こだわるな。マーシア伯エアドリクは一地方領主に過ぎぬ。戦局を大きく見よ。どうでもいいわい。そんなこと。
You need to.
充実した戦争ライフを送れりゃいいんだよ。どうか東部鎮定にお力をお貸しくださいませ。トルケル殿の圧倒的な。どこで誰とやるかは俺が決めるぜこの野郎。サイコロ頭。
Dice head. Jesus Christ, Forkill.
お前がこれから何をして何者になっていくのか、この目で見届けてやるってな。おめえはまだ何者でもねえ。イングランド王でさえねえ。ただの若造だ。どうしたっておめえは戦を避けられねえ。
He knows that.
血と鉄で切り開くしかねえんだ。アシェラットがそうしたようにな。忘れんじゃねえぞ。
Why do you think there's so many battles being fought? Yeah, he's not wrong. Look what they did to his dad. I can understand what Forkill's trying to say is that you don't necessarily want to do this, but you may have no option but to establish your power
貴重
through
な忠告
fighting.
だ。裏表のない男だ。あやつのように生きられるなら痛快であろうな。
He doesn't want bloodshed, he doesn't want war, but his path to becoming a king was shed with blood. So really, it shouldn't come as a surprise. Oh,
銀にして4000ポンド。
he's about to have a heart
今
attack.
の我々に集められるすべてだ。
He doesn't care about that.
軍を引き上げてくれるならば、さらに4000坪をしよう。悪い
Not about the
話では
money.
ないはずだ、クヌート。返答はいかに？クヌート殿。
No.
安いな。
Oh, that's so like Askeladd. That smirk. This is nothing. Never let them know your next move.
そなたはこの金銀を私がマーシアから出ていく
But he
ことを
wants
望んで支
Mercia,
払
so
うの
he's
だ
not going to leave.
エアドリクよ。
8000ポンドだぞ。退去料に足りんということはないはずだ。
Not about the money.
そなたはこのイングランドのブレトワルダであるクヌートに金を持って治療から出ていけと申しておるのだ。
Oh, he's asserting his claim.
世はそなたの王である。世は世の領内の反乱を鎮めるためこの地へ来たのだ。無心のためではない。
Oh,
我が君は由緒正しきウェセックス王家。
that's treason, technically.
貴様などではない。こら予算か。しかし父上ならん。時と場をわきまえ
They've
よ。
shown that they align against Canute, who also fled England in its time of need. So,
自らの配下が治療安堵のために勝手に戦列を抜けると申してもエセルレッドは許すのか。
oh,
王が2人いるから世が乱れる。1人死なねばならぬ。
and it won't be him.
かの者エセルレッドは先の戦の折
Canute
神と
didn't.
玉座を捨てて亡命した腰抜けだ。そんな男にイングランドの未来を託すのは愚かなことだと思わぬか。
He really learnt a lot from Askeladd, didn't he?
この私。
すでに裏切っている。そなたの手を借りたいのだ。エアドリク。エセルレッドに。消えてもら
Oh,
え
is this how it ties back to the poison? Okay.
長年重臣としてあやつに仕えてきたそなたなら良い方法を知っていよう。
私から最後の忠節まで奪うというのか、若造。
その代わりマーシアは奪わぬ。エセルレッドの首が代価だ。
You really want Mercia?
休戦交渉は決裂した。
Then prepare for battle.
な司令官とは断固戦うぞ。
この陣は小心者ではないようだぞ。なかなかの気骨だ。
さて、お試しになってはいかがですか？
そなたに見せたいものがある。
It's really interesting seeing this authoritative side of Canute. This understanding that not everything can be done with peace and negotiation. That's what Forker was trying to say to him, is that sometimes you need to exert your strength, you need to fight, you need to go to war, you need to shed blood. That not everything can be done through talking, especially if he wants to establish control over this territory.
やれ。
Is it a signal?
のろし。何の合図だこれは。
An attack, right?
これは何をしている？クヌート。
Showing you the consequences of standing against them. He's not even answering. Oh my god.
あれを。
Showing his power, his might.
あっちにも。
Making him realize who he's standing against.
何の合図だこれは。
世と戦うとはこういうことだ。想像するがいい、エアドリク。 たった今、マーシアは灰に帰した。
Holy shit.
わかったか。世がその気になれば、貴様らを焼き尽くすことなど造作もないのだ。
Oh, that backbone's gone now, isn't it?
エセルレッドの首を差し出して安寧を変え、それが利口だ。
Oh god. The imagery in this show is stunning. It's almost reminding me of a funeral pyre.
この翌年の1016年
So
4月
emphasizing
イングランド王エセル
the
レッド
amount of
2世
lives that will be lost in the
死去する
process of standing against Canute. Oh. Gruesome.
病没とされている。
Probably his vassal poisoning him slowly but surely.
エセルレッドの死後、その息子エドモンドが王位を継承する。クヌート軍を王位に苦しめ前線
He's
す
also
る。
very young as well. Two young kings. Not great.
1ヶ月後の同年11月、やはり病没する。
Okay. That's a bit sus, isn't it? Oh, he's so pissed off. He just wants to fight.
病没ときたね。
No.
スベン王でも10年かかった国取り合戦が3年足らずで終わっちまった。
Because Canute was smarter in how he went about it. No more battles.
その話はやめろ。酒がまずくなる。
I wonder if we'll see Forkill turn against Canute then.
スベン、エセルレッド、エドモンド。ライバルたちの相次ぐ変死によって1018年クヌートは正式にイングランド王となる。
Oh, his beard's growing in now. Oh, is that it? Okay, so it was interesting to see how Canute becomes King of England and the underhanded tactics and show of power in establishing that, because obviously he got the vassal under his control by showing that he can reduce him to ash as much as he can reduce Mercia. So his show of strength, his show of power. And that was all gleaned from Forkill saying to him that, you know, your path to becoming king was paved with blood, so sometimes you need to do the same thing. Forkill's basically lamenting his avoidance of war, his avoidance of bloodshed, but sometimes it needs to be done in order to achieve your ends. I'm not saying that I agree with that, but in this time and era to become a king, you do essentially need to do whatever you can to establish that. So I think it was very evident that Canute really didn't have much of a choice. He shies away from bloodshed, he shies away from battle because he wants to be a leader of man. He wants to talk and negotiate, but there's only so far you can go. And to be taken seriously, he needs to lay down the law. He needs to show that he is somebody to be feared. As much as he can bring peace to these people, he needs to also make them fearful of him. Make them understand that he can also reap destruction if he so desires, which is what he did with the Earl of Mercia. And then the Earl of Mercia, who is the vassal, and obviously Canute picks up the wine glass, which is symbolic of the poison. We saw that poison was also a tactic that had been implemented earlier at the beginning of the episode with the dog dying, and it was an underhanded tactic. But what that means or insinuates is that the vassal has the ability to slowly poison the king over time. So it looks like a natural illness, but it's not. And then the same thing happens to the son. Again, the vassal is close enough for that to happen. And in less time than his father, because of his strategic manipulations, Canute has been able to sit the throne by shedding blood, by walking that path and not shying away from it. If he went down the path that he initially thought to go down before Forkill was blunt with him, he likely would have been drawn into a long out conflict for multiple years. But because he was willing to listen to Forkill and able to take those words on board that he's a nobody, he hasn't established himself as king yet, and that in order to do so, he needs to show his strength and his prowess, that he needs to not just accept the first truce that comes along because he's intent on peace. He needs to make a display of his ability to dominate those that stand against him. And well, it worked in the end. He's now king, but Thorkill doesn't look happy, which makes me think potentially Thorkill could end up turning against Canute. If Harold comes to rival Canute for control of England, we could see perhaps Thorkill side with Harold solely because Thorkill likes battle. That's his drive. That's his purpose for living. And he likes being on the side that is the losing side. He doesn't like to always be the winner. So I feel like he might side with Harold because Harold would be the underdog because he's coming into a rival kingdom rather than with Canute. But he doesn't seem overly happy, which makes me worry that he might turn against him, that he doesn't want to be connected with him because Canute got into the position not technically through waging war or battles, but through underhanded tactics. And yeah, he listened to Thorkill's advice, but he didn't need to do it the way that Thorkill wanted him to in order to achieve it. And I think that's why Thorkill's a bit pissed because he didn't get to do his fighting and his battles like he expected to. I wonder if Thorfinn and Thorkill get reunited at some point. It would be nice to kind of see them interact with each other again after all that's happened and maybe learn as well what happened with Thorfinn for him to end up being a slave, because the last we saw he was pinned down for causing the scar on Canute's face, and Canute had to stop them from killing him because essentially it was treason. And I think the compromise was obviously Thorfinn had to be punished, so therefore he was sold into slavery. But Canute's against it. So I don't know if Canute would have sanctioned that or if he would have agreed with it, or if maybe he punished him, but then somebody took it upon themselves to sell him into slavery. I don't know. We will need to have that context given to us. But because we've seen Canute's journey to becoming King of England in this one episode, we might actually get flashbacks then to Thorfinn's journey into becoming a slave and what happened there. But I do feel for Canute because this isn't the way that he wanted to rule. This isn't how he expected himself to become king. But unfortunately, sometimes we have to do what we don't want to do in order to achieve our position. And sometimes you have to shed blood in order to create the better world that he aspires to make. He can't establish paradise if he's not king and he's constantly rivaled by others. If it means going into battle, he will do it, if only because he sees the potential benefit is rebuilding a paradise, in establishing peace once and for all. But I just don't think he's going to really be allowed to have peace. I think there's always going to be people that rise up against him that are rivaling for his position. But it was really interesting to see his background, see his perspective, how he becomes the King of England, but also Thorkill's discontentment, but Canute's willingness to listen and take it on board. And also that like crafty way with words. It just reminds me so much of Askeladd, that show of power, that act of intimidation, that smirk on his face, the way in which he speaks to the Earl of Mercia and baits him into that trap by showing him just what he's capable of doing, what his army can do to Mercia, render them into nothing but ash. That is just pure Askeladd, that tactic and strategy and ability to intimidate your enemy and to be 2 steps ahead of them. Canute really did learn a lot from him, and we're seeing that here. And it just made me happy in the sense that it's like Askeladd is living on through Canute's use of his tactics and strategies that he's learned from their time together. He is essentially becoming the king that Askeladd wanted him to be, especially in learning from Askeladd and utilizing and taking inspiration from some of his tactics. He is very much going to be a good king. He is going to hopefully build this paradise, but I don't think it'll be as easy again as he expects it to be. I think what we might see crop up, as I've mentioned earlier, is this distinction between realism and idealism, this idealistic hope and the reality of trying to make that come true. But I think that's all I want to say for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this react, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment below to help boost this video into the algorithm. Until next episode, bye!